January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles, California. A mother was walking her young daughter to a shoe repair shop when she noticed something in a vacant lot on South Norton Avenue. From a distance, it looked like a discarded mannequin, broken in half, pale white. She walked closer. Then she screamed. It wasn't a mannequin, it was the body of a young woman, cut completely in half at the waist, drained of blood, positioned with care. Her face slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating a horrific Glasgow smile. There was no blood at the scene. She'd been murdered somewhere else, then dumped here like trash. Within hours, the case exploded into the biggest murder investigation in Los Angeles history. The victim was identified as Elizabeth Short, 22 years old, an aspiring actress who'd come to Hollywood chasing the dream. The press gave her a name that would echo through history, the Black Dahlia. Over 77 years, more than 50 people have confessed to the murder. Hundreds of suspects investigated, dozens of books written, multiple theories proposed. But despite one of the most intensive investigations in LAPD history, the Black Dahlia murder remains unsolved, and the killer was never caught. Before she became the Black Dahlia, she was Elizabeth Ann Short, born July 29, 1924, in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. She was one of 5 daughters. Her childhood was difficult. Her father faked his suicide and abandoned the family during the Great Depression, leaving them in poverty. In 1943, at age 19, Elizabeth moved to California. Like thousands of young women, she was drawn to the promise of Hollywood. She wanted to be an actress, a star, someone important. She was beautiful, striking dark hair, fair skin, bright smile. She had the look, but talent and luck, those were harder to find. Elizabeth worked odd jobs, waitress, movie theater usher, anything to survive. She lived in boarding houses, often unable to pay rent. Friends described her as sweet but lost, dreaming of stardom but with no clear path to get there. She dated frequently, mostly soldiers and aspiring actors. She loved attention. She loved feeling wanted. The press claimed she was called the Black Dahlia because she wore black clothes and had dark hair, a reference to the film noir movie The Blue Dahlia that had just been released. But this was likely invented by reporters. Her friends didn't call her that. The name was created after her death, a media invention that stuck. In December 1946, Elizabeth was living in San Diego with a woman named Dorothy French and her family. On January 9, 1947, she told them she was going to meet her sister. She took a bus to Los Angeles. She was seen at the Biltmore Hotel on January 9th. After that, she disappeared for 6 days. What happened during those 6 days remains a mystery. January 15, 1947. Her mutilated body was discovered in a vacant lot in Leimert Park. She'd been dead approximately 10 hours, but she'd been missing for 6 days. Where was she during that time, and who killed her? The crime scene was unlike anything Los Angeles police had ever seen. The body had been severed at the waist, cleanly, precisely, with what the medical examiner described as surgical precision. The 2 halves were positioned a foot apart. There was no blood on the ground, none. The body had been completely drained and washed. She'd been killed elsewhere, then transported here. The autopsy revealed horrific details. Cause of death: hemorrhage and shock from multiple lacerations to the face and blows to the head. But the mutilation had been done after death. Her face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, the Glasgow smile.
chunks of flesh removed from her thighs, evidence of torture before death. The killer had spent hours with the body. But here's what made investigators freeze: the precision. The body had been washed clean, not a fiber, not a hair, no fingerprints at the dump site. The killer had been meticulous, methodical. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was planned, controlled, the work of someone who knew what they were doing. The dump site was bold. South Norton Avenue was a residential area, houses nearby, streets with traffic, yet the killer transported a body, cut in half, and positioned it in an open lot without anyone noticing. It would have required a vehicle, time, confidence. The audacity was chilling. Police found rope marks on her wrists and ankles. She'd been bound. Grass and fecal matter in her stomach. She'd been forced to eat it before death, possibly during torture. The medical examiner estimated she'd been tortured for up to 2 days before being killed. The sadism was extreme. The LAPD threw everything at the case. More than 250 officers assigned, thousands of interviews conducted, every tip followed up. The city was obsessed. The press covered it relentlessly. It was the story of 1947. Detectives Harry Hansen and Finis Brown led the investigation. They worked the case for years, but they were fighting the media as much as solving the crime. Newspapers interfered with evidence. Reporters bribed cops for information. Tips flooded in. Most were useless. The investigation became a circus.
More than 50 people confessed to the murder. All false. Attention seekers, disturbed individuals, people wanting to be infamous. Each confession had to be investigated and debunked. It wasted precious time and resources. Then the letters started. On January 24th, a package arrived at the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper. Inside, Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, Social Security card, photographs, and an address book. All had been soaked in gasoline, an attempt to destroy fingerprints. A note made from cut-out newspaper letters read, "Here are Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." More letters followed. Some seemed genuine, others obvious fakes. One claimed, "I will give up in Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." The letters stopped. Investigators believed some were from the actual killer, but which ones? And were the fingerprints destroyed before the items were mailed, or were there never fingerprints to begin with? As months turned to years, the investigation stalled. No solid suspect, no weapon found, no crime scene identified. The case went cold. Detectives Hansen and Brown worked it until retirement. They never solved it. It haunted them until they died. Hundreds of suspects were investigated over the decades. Let's examine the most compelling. Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy Los Angeles physician with a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, brilliant, cultured, and allegedly deeply disturbed. In 2003, his son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD homicide detective, published a book claiming his father was the Black Dahlia killer. Steve Hodel discovered that in 1950, George Hodel's home had been bugged by police investigating him for incest and sexual abuse of his daughter. The recordings captured disturbing conversations. At one point, Hodel allegedly says, "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now." The case against George Hodel includes he knew Elizabeth Short, he had surgical knowledge, he had access to facilities where the body could have been dismembered, and the bugging transcripts suggest possible guilt. But it's all circumstantial. No physical evidence. The recordings are ambiguous. Many investigators remain unconvinced. George Hodel died in 1999, never charged. Leslie Dillon, a 27-year-old bellhop and mortician's assistant from Florida.
In 1948, he inserted himself into the investigation by writing letters to LAPD psychiatrist Dr. Paul DeRiver, discussing the case in disturbing detail. Dillon knew facts that hadn't been released to the public.
When questioned, Dillon claimed a friend named Jeff Connors committed the murder, but Jeff Connors didn't exist. Dillon was held and interrogated, but eventually released due to lack of evidence. Some investigators believed he was the killer. Others thought he was just obsessed with the case. He was never charged. Mark Hansen, a wealthy nightclub owner who knew Elizabeth Short. She'd stayed at his home for several months in 1946. He had a reputation for pursuing young actresses. Some theorize he became obsessed with Elizabeth, and when she rejected him, he killed her. The address book found in the anonymous package belonged to Hansen, but why would the killer send it? Was it a frame job? Police investigated Hansen extensively, but found no evidence. Robert Red Manley, a married salesman who gave Elizabeth a ride from San Diego to Los Angeles on January 9th, the last confirmed sighting. He dropped her at the Biltmore Hotel. He was interrogated repeatedly. He failed multiple polygraph tests, but those results were inconclusive. His wife provided an alibi for the time of the murder. He was never charged, but the suspicion destroyed his life. He suffered a nervous breakdown and was institutionalized. He maintained his innocence until his death. The press invented the werewolf killer, a sadistic monster who tortured women. They connected the Black Dahlia to other unsolved murders in Los Angeles. The Cleveland torso murders from the 1930s had similar mutilations. Some believed it was the same killer, but there's no evidence linking the cases. The truth? We don't know. The killer could have been anyone: a doctor with surgical skills, a mortician familiar with bodies, a sadist who planned meticulously, someone who knew Elizabeth, or a random predator who saw an opportunity. Without DNA, without witnesses, without a confession, the case remains forever cold. 77 years later, the vacant lot on South Norton Avenue is now a residential street. Houses stand where Elizabeth Short's body was found. Few people know what happened there. The case officially remains open, though LAPD hasn't actively investigated it in decades. Elizabeth Short is buried in Oakland, California. Her grave is visited regularly by people who never knew her. They leave flowers, Black Dahlias when they can find them. She's been dead longer than she was alive, forever 22, forever the Black Dahlia. The case has spawned over 50 books, multiple films, countless documentaries, true crime podcasts, websites dedicated to solving it. Elizabeth Short has become more famous in death than she ever could have been in life. She wanted to be a star. In the most tragic way possible, she became one. But we should remember, before she was the Black Dahlia, she was Elizabeth Short, a young woman with dreams, with friends, with a family who loved her. She deserved better than the life she had, and she deserved far better than the death she received. Case number CR003, the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Ann Short, January 15, 1947. Status: unsolved. Hollywood's darkest mystery, and one that may never be solved.